What if one of the biggest food lies in modern history started with a quiet payment, a famous medical journal, and one simple trick? Make people fear fat so no one looks too hard at sugar? For years, that message shaped breakfast tables, school lunches, food labels, and even doctor advice. People were told to watch the butter, skip the egg yolk, and buy the low-fat version. But who helped build that story? Who paid for it? And did the real danger get pushed out of sight? The truth is messy. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. First, one important point. The title says the government paid scientists. The best-known proof from history shows something a little different. In the most famous case, the hidden money came from the sugar industry, not the government. But later, government advice helped carry that message much farther. So the story is not simple. It is a chain. Industry money helped shape the message, and public policy helped spread it. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to a time when heart disease was rising fast in the United States. In the 1950s and 1960s, scientists were trying to figure out why so many people were dying from heart attacks. Two ideas got a lot of attention. One said fat and cholesterol were the main problem. The other said sugar may also play a big role. That fight mattered. It was not just about science. It was about money, food sales, public trust, and the future of the American diet. In 1954, the president of the Sugar Research Foundation, a trade group for the sugar industry, gave a speech that now looks very important. He said that if Americans moved toward a lower-fat diet, sugar intake could rise by more than 1/3. Read that again. As early as 1954, the sugar industry could see a business chance in blaming fat. Then came trouble for sugar. By the mid-1960s, more articles and reports were raising questions about sucrose, which is table sugar. Some scientists were linking sugar to high blood fats, including triglycerides, which were being discussed as possible heart risk factors. The sugar industry did not like that. So in 1965, it launched a project that later became famous. The project was called Project 226. The Sugar Research Foundation reached out to researchers at Harvard. The names that show up in the records are Mark Hegsted, Frederick Stare, and Robert McGandy. They were connected to the Harvard School of Public Health. The industry offered money for a review paper. At first, the amounts were smaller, but the total payment reached $6,500, which researchers in 2016 said was about $48,900 in 2016 money. That review was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1967. That is one of the most respected medical journals in the world. The paper pushed the idea that the best way to prevent heart disease was to cut cholesterol and replace saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat. It played down the case against sugar. And here's the part that still shocks people now. The sugar industry's funding and role were not disclosed in the published paper. That means readers were not told that a sugar trade group had helped pay for the work and had been involved behind the scenes. Researchers at UC San Francisco later said the industry helped set the goal of the review, suggested papers to include, and received drafts before publication. If that happened today, most people would call it a major conflict of interest. The paper did not appear in a vacuum. That is important. The fat theory was already strong in those years. Many scientists already believed saturated fat was a big driver of heart disease. The American Heart Association had moved in that direction. Later, the U.S. government also leaned into that idea. So the hidden sugar money did not create the whole story from nothing, but it seems to have helped strengthen one side while weakening the other. That is how influence often works. It does not always invent a lie from scratch. Sometimes it takes a story people already half believe, then gives that story more money, more status, and more reach. In 2016, researchers Kristen Kearns, Laura Schmidt, and Stanton Glantz published a paper in JAMA Internal Medicine after digging through more than 340 industry documents covering more than 1,500 pages. They said the record showed the sugar industry worked with scientists in the mid-1960s to shift attention toward fat and cholesterol and away from sugar. Their paper made headlines around the world because it gave people something concrete: names, letters, payments, dates, and a paper trail. One line from the old record stands out. John Hickson, a vice president at the Sugar Research Foundation, wrote that the industry had a special interest in claims that sucrose might be causing problems that had been blamed on fat. In simple words, they wanted sugar cleared and fat blamed. That is why people call it a cover-up. But to be fair, there is also pushback on that word. In 2018, two historians, David Merritt Johns and Gerald Oppenheimer, argued that the case should not be turned into a simple conspiracy story. They said there was no single smoking gun proving the sugar industry changed all of nutrition science by itself. They also said the low-fat view was already the main view among experts, and some of the sugar evidence at the time was weaker than people now remember. They pointed out that dairy groups also funded some research that supported the case against fat. That matters because good history needs care. We should not turn a messy story into a cartoon. The safest thing to say is this: hidden industry funding happened. The review was real. The lack of disclosure was real. The effort to protect sugar's image was real. But the full rise of low-fat advice had more than one cause. Then, public policy came in. In 1977, the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs released the Dietary Goals for Americans. That report told people to cut total fat to about 30% of calories. It also said to cut sugar to about 15% of calories. So sugar was not fully ignored, but fat took center stage in the public mind. Then came the first official dietary guidelines for Americans in 1980. Over time, low-fat eating became even more official. By 1990, the guidelines gave clear numbers for fat and saturated fat. For many people, the message got boiled down to something much simpler than the science. Fat is bad, low fat is good. And when a message gets that simple, food companies know exactly what to do with it. They can take fat out of a product, stamp low fat on the front, and make it look healthy, even if the food is still loaded with sugar or other refined carbs. That helped shape what people bought for years. Low-fat cookies, low-fat yogurt, low-fat snacks, low-fat desserts. The label sounded safe. The food often was not. That is one reason this story still matters. It is not just about old letters in an archive. It is about what millions of families were taught to fear and what they were taught to ignore. It also shows how trust works. Most people do not read raw research. They trust journals, experts, universities, and government advice. Usually, they have to. That is normal. But when money hides in the background, trust can be used like a weapon. And this is not just a problem from the 1960s. Today, major health groups do warn about added sugar. The current U.S. dietary advice says people aged 2 and older should keep added sugar under 10% of daily calories. The American Heart Association goes further. It says most women should aim for no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day, and most men no more than 9. So the story has changed. Sugar is no longer getting a free pass. But fat did not turn innocent overnight either. That is another place where people get confused. The real lesson is not that fat was the villain and now sugar is the villain. The lesson is that nutrition got flattened into a simple battle, and simple battles sell better than messy truth. Some fats are harmful in high amounts. Some are helpful. Sugar can be damaging, especially in large amounts and in drinks and ultra-processed foods. Real food science is harder than one word. Still, the old damage lingers. Once people hear the same message for decades, it sticks. Even now, many people still think a sugary cereal with a low-fat label sounds better than eggs, nuts, or full-fat plain yogurt. That is how long a bad frame can last. It does not just change headlines. It changes habits. So was there a cover-up? If by cover-up you mean there is evidence that a sugar trade group secretly paid Harvard scientists, helped shape a review, and kept that role hidden while the paper played down sugar and pointed at fat, then yes, there is strong evidence for that. If by cover-up you mean one secret payment by itself fooled the whole world and single-handedly created every low-fat policy that followed, the history is less clean than that. The truth sits in the middle, and that middle is powerful enough. Industry money entered science. The funding was hidden. A famous review helped support a message that favored sugar's business interests. That message fit the view many experts already had. Then public advice helped make that message feel official, and ordinary people lived with the result. That is the part people should remember. Not that every old scientist was evil, not that every piece of advice was fake, but that money can bend attention. It can decide which question gets asked, which doubt gets pushed aside, and which story sounds settled before it really is. So the next time a package says healthy, heart, smart, light, or low fat, stop for a second. Ask what got taken out. Ask what got added back in. Ask who benefits when one nutrient becomes the public enemy. Because sometimes the most powerful lie is not a flat-out false sentence. Sometimes it is a spotlight. Put the spotlight on fat, and sugar can slip into the dark. And once that happens, people do not even know what they are missing. That may be the real cover-up. Not just that money changed a paper, but that the paper helped change what millions of people thought was safe. And when science, money, and public policy all start pushing in the same direction, even a weak story can begin to feel like common sense. That is why this old fight still matters now, because the past is still sitting in the grocery store. It is still on food labels. It is still in the advice people repeat without asking where it came from. And if you want to understand why sugar stayed off the hook for so long, this is one of the clearest places to start. A payment, a hidden hand, a famous journal, a message the public would hear for decades, and a truth that took far too long to catch up.